He made $2.2 billion in 1 year. Not revenue, but personal income. That averages over $6 million a day, or $250,000 every hour. While you sleep, he adds the value of a luxury mansion to his bank account. He also works as president, earning a $400,000 salary, none of which he keeps. A while back, the U.S. Office of Government Ethics released a 927-page financial document laying out President Trump's ledger for the world to see for the first time. Today, we're going to talk about Trump's wealth strategy, the kind of stuff you won't see anywhere else. The United States has a government ethics law that requires all senior public officials to declare their personal financial status to the Office of Government Ethics once a year, and the president is no exception. But for the very same form, the submissions from different people can vary wildly. The one Obama submitted before leaving office was only 8 pages long. Biden's was 11 pages, while this one from Trump is 927 pages. You tell me, is that honest or what? The most eye-catching figure when you open it is $2.2 billion, which is the actual personal income Trump received in 2025, his first year back in the White House. This is the highest annual income ever reported by a U.S. president while in office on record. And the year before, when he hadn't yet returned to the White House, this figure was only $622 million. In other words, in his first year back in the White House, his income increased by 3.5 times. Where did such a huge increase come from? Well, this is the most worth seeing part of this document, and it's what I'm going to tell you about today. You must watch until the end of today's show. You will definitely be amazed by Trump's wealth-building strategy. If you had asked anyone on Wall Street 10 years ago what Trump made his money from, the answer is just 3 words: real estate. This is also the impression many of us have regarding the source of Trump's wealth: buildings, hotels, golf courses. But now, after flipping through these 900-plus pages, the biggest chunk is actually cryptocurrency, something Trump used to bash, which earned him $1.4 billion in a single year, accounting for nearly 2/3 of his total income. For someone who's been in the real estate business for 40 years, it's surprising that his biggest cash flow is now in blockchain. This would have been completely unimaginable 5 years ago. And this is the most anomalous part of Trump's wealth. The vast majority of the super rich are only used to making money using one model throughout their lives. Take Buffett, for example, who has been trading stocks his whole life, or Musk, who has spent most of his life building hard tech. Trump, on the other hand, has completely torn down and rebuilt his way of making money 3 times over the past 40-plus years, and each time, the starting point of that reconstruction stemmed from a setback that nearly wiped him out. To understand Trump's 4 wealth turnarounds over the past 40 years, we have to start back in 1980s New York. In 1978, right next to Grand Central Terminal in New York, sat a half-dead old building, the Commodore Hotel. What was that area like back then? A bankrupt city, vacant office buildings, and neighborhoods where you wouldn't dare walk around during the day. Trump, in his early 30s, well, he set his sights on it. But at the time, he didn't have much money on hand. His father, Fred Trump, was in the business of government-subsidized affordable housing in Brooklyn and Queens. Stable, sure, but with thin profit margins and, well, not exactly a grand vision. But his son, Trump, had his heart set on Manhattan. He did something that almost no one dared to think of at the time. He went to negotiate with the New York City government, demanding a 40-year property tax abatement. His reasoning was that this piece of land was a lost cause, and if he came in to save it, they should grant him a tax exemption. And he actually pulled it off. The old building was torn down and rebuilt, becoming the Grand Hyatt Hotel. Trump became an overnight sensation. This was the first major tax incentive in New York history granted to a private developer. In this deal, Trump barely spent any of his own money. The land belonged to someone else, the taxes were waived by the government, the funds were loaned by the bank, and the hotel brand was Hyatt. All he provided was his sales pitch and a proposal. In financial terms, this is called leverage. For the next few years, this strategy went off without a hitch. In 1983, Trump Tower went up on Fifth Avenue, featuring a gold glass curtain wall and a 6-story atrium waterfall. It was the first time he put his name on the top of a building. In 1985, he spent about $8 million to purchase an old estate in Palm Beach called Mar-a-Lago. 40 years later, Forbes' valuation of this property had risen to over $500 million. Up to this point, everything was perfect. But leverage has a characteristic. It's as painful when it amplifies losses as it is satisfying when it amplifies gains. And Trump was in the most dangerous position at that time, having just had a string of wins. Then he walked into Atlantic City. Casinos were the hottest business in the U.S. in the 1980s, and also the biggest money pits. He first acquired Trump Plaza in Trump Castle. In 1988, he spent another $273 million to buy the unfinished Taj Mahal Casino from Merv Griffin. Trump called this building the eighth wonder of the world, and it cost nearly $1 billion to build. But how did he pay for it at the time? With $675 million in junk bonds at a 14% annual interest rate. What does 14% actually mean? It means that before the building even opened for business, he had to shell out nearly $100 million in interest every year. He needed it to be packed the moment it opened and packed every single day just to keep it afloat. What made it even worse was that to get this money, Trump started signing personal guarantees, a move that completely tied him personally to these projects. On April 2, 1990, the Taj Mahal opened. That same year, the U.S. economic recession hit. In August of that year, New Jersey regulators released a report with some alarming numbers. The total debt under Trump's name was $3.4 billion, with $832.5 million of that personally guaranteed by him. A direct quote from the report stated that the possibility of a total financial collapse of the Trump organization could not be ruled out. By December, the Taj Mahal had an interest payment of $18.4 million due, but Trump had no money left in his accounts. The scene that followed, I think, is the most vivid moment of the entire 1980s. His father, Fred Trump, who was in his 80s, sent a lawyer to drive to the Trump Castle Casino, where he bought $3.3 million worth of chips at the counter, and then, without gambling a single cent, turned around and left. It was this $3.3 million in cash that allowed his son to pay the interest. Later, the casino was fined $65,000 for this, because such an operation is a violation of gambling laws, but that fine was completely negligible compared to the hole they were in at the time. What followed was a chain reaction. In 1991, the Taj Mahal Casino fired the first shot of bankruptcy, and Trump was forced to bite the bullet and give up half of his equity. In 1992, Trump Castle, Trump Plaza, and the Plaza Hotel in New York were reorganized one after another. He sold off his 282-foot yacht, the Trump Princess, and sold the Trump Shuttle airline. But what hurt his pride the most was that the major creditor banks put him on a tight leash, stipulating that his monthly spending could not exceed $450,000. The former king of Manhattan, now having his pocket money restricted by the banks. But it was precisely at this most embarrassing moment that a crucial turning point occurred. The banks held internal meetings to discuss how to handle this mess of Trump's. According to standard procedure, that would mean foreclosure, auction, and liquidation, recovering whatever they could. However, after this group of shrewd creditors pored over the ledgers until they were worn out, they reached a counterintuitive conclusion: if they repossessed the building and tried to sell it themselves, they wouldn't get a good price at all. But if they let Trump keep his name on the door as the boss, this pile of assets could actually fetch a good price. In other words, the banks realized that the name Trump was worth even more than the steel and concrete structures he owned. So they decided to keep him on. This was probably one of the most far-sighted judgments in business history over the past 40 years, and Trump himself, of course, understood this perfectly. Regarding how he built his own brand credibility, there's a classic anecdote that has circulated in New York media circles for years. In the early 90s, many entertainment reporters received calls from a man claiming to be Trump's personal PR manager named John Miller. In these calls, Miller would speak with a thick New York accent, excitedly dishing out scoops to reporters like, "Oh, Mr. Trump's assets are incredibly vast," or "Which socialite or female celebrity is chasing after Trump now?" Later, when the recording was exposed, everyone could tell that it was clearly Trump himself disguising his voice. Although he consistently denied it afterward, regardless of who actually made that call, the core logic behind it was extremely crucial in that era. As long as people believe your name carries weight, it serves as your strongest form of credit. Having understood this logic, Trump took two final steps in 1995. He bundled his casino businesses into Trump hotels and casino resorts and took them public, successfully securing hundreds of millions of dollars in cash from the stock market. Second, he reported a massive loss of over $900 million on his tax returns. Under the U.S. tax laws at the time, this loss could be used to legally offset his taxable income for many years to come. By the late 1990s, Trump had finally climbed out of that debt hole. At this point, he realized one thing: building skyscrapers and running physical businesses was too heavy, too slow, and too prone to blowing up. So, was there any business where you could just sit back and collect money without having to sink in capital or bet your entire fortune? Well, that thought pushed him into the next phase, and the gateway to that next phase turned out to be a television set. In 2003, a television producer named Mark Burnett approached Trump. Burnett was hot at the time, having produced Survivor. He was one of the pioneers of the reality TV genre in the United States. He wanted to create a new show at the time and needed a boss to sit at the end of the conference table, so he approached Trump. The reason was straightforward: because everyone in America knew about your Trump Tower. The premise of the show was simple. A group of young people would be split into two teams to complete business tasks. The winners would stay, and one person from the losing team would be eliminated. When it came time for elimination, the person sitting at the end of the table would point their finger and say, "You're fired." In January 2004, The Apprentice premiered on NBC, and its first season's ratings soared into the top 10 nationwide. Looking back now, the significance of this show for Trump went far beyond just being a variety show. Before this, he was a New York real estate developer. After this, he was the successful businessman in living rooms all across America. What the audience saw on TV wasn't just a developer, but a persona: direct, assertive, and no nonsense. Sitting in a lavish, gold-plated office, passing judgment on others. That image was broadcast once a week for over a decade. The New York Times conducted a tax investigation into Trump in 2020 and found that The Apprentice, along with the endorsements, appearances, and licensing deals it brought, generated approximately $427 million for Trump. $427 million is certainly a lot, but the real goldmine wasn't the show itself. During this period, Trump completed the most important cognitive upgrade of his business career. He discovered that the name Trump could be detached from steel and concrete and sold on its own. What happened next was only logical. A developer in Dubai, a developer in Istanbul, a developer in Manila, they would provide the land, put up the money, build the towers, and shoulder all the risk themselves. Once the building was finished, they would pay a licensing fee to hang the name Trump on top of their building. For the developers, this money was well spent. By putting up those 5 letters, Trump, the average price per square meter could jump up a notch, and it made the units easier to sell. For Trump, this business was so good that he didn't have to put up a single cent or take on any risk. He just had to provide the 5 letters and then sit back and collect the money. This was a brilliant pivot for Trump, moving from a heavy asset model to a light asset one. The debt crisis in the 90s that nearly wiped him out taught him exactly that. And so, the Trump brand began to expand into every category that could be licensed. Trump University, Trump Vodka, Trump Steaks, Trump Water, Trump Ties, Trump Cologne, Trump Mattresses, and so on and so forth. Some of these ventures succeeded, some lost money, and some even landed him in lawsuits. Take Trump University, for example. In the end, it settled for $25 million. But that's not what's important. What Trump was really producing during this phase wasn't those products, but a method he had repeatedly validated. First, build up attention, and then sow that attention. By the eve of his presidential run in 2015, Forbes valued him at approximately $4.5 billion. His asset portfolio consisted of several office buildings in Manhattan, golf courses scattered across the UK, the US, and Scotland, the Mar-a-Lago estate, and a global network of Trump brand licensing. On June 16th of that year, he descended the golden escalator at Trump Tower to announce his candidacy. At the time, almost none of the reporters took him seriously. Wall Street analysts did the math. Why would he walk away from a perfectly good licensing business to run for president? What no one expected was that over the next 8 years, he would first lose nearly half of his net worth and then earn it all back in an unpredictable way. On January 20th, 2017, Trump was sworn into office. That same year, Forbes valued him at $3.5 billion, which was a full billion less than before he ran for office. Why was that? The reason isn't complicated, because the licensing business is, at its core, built on consensus. Developers around the world are willing to pay to put your name on their projects, provided that your name represents prestige, success, and respectability. But once that name became a highly politicized symbol, it lost its biggest market. And so, over the next 4 years, a series of contract terminations began. Trump International hotels in several cities were delisted and renamed, clothing lines were pulled from department stores, and some overseas projects that had been negotiated well fell through. At the same time, during his first term, Trump set a rule for himself. The Trump Organization would not pursue any new overseas deals. This proactive stance to cut off conflicts of interest directly choked off more than half of his licensing cash flow. In 2022, his revenue from overseas deals was down to just $9 million, and it dropped to $8 million in 2023. At the same time, tax and legal costs were also piling up. Ultimately, in 2021, Forbes' valuation of Trump fell to $2.3 billion. In 2023, he dropped off the Forbes 400 list. For someone who spent decades obsessing over this list, this was probably the most painful test of all. Up to this point, the story looks like a standard script about a business tycoon turning into a politician, with the price being a half net worth. But what happened next completely upended the script everyone was expecting. The turning point came in January 2021. Trump's social media accounts were completely banned, and everyone thought this was the most fatal blow to his influence. But his reaction was completely unexpected. He built his own. Truth Social was launched, and its parent company is called Trump Media and Technology Group, abbreviated as TMTG. By any financial metric, this company doesn't look like a real business. It has annual revenue of only a few $1 million, while losing hundreds of millions a year. Any serious investment banking analyst looking at this financial statement would come to the same conclusion: it's worthless. However, on March 26, 2024, TMTG merged with a special purpose acquisition company. Essentially, it went public on the NASDAQ by using a shell company. On the day it went public, this company with less than $4 million in revenue saw its market cap soar to several $billion, and the shares held by Trump himself were at one point worth over $5 billion. How could a company that barely makes any money skyrocket like that? The answer is simple: because people aren't buying its stock at all. They're casting a vote for him. The vast majority of those who rushed in to snap up the stock weren't doing it for investment dividends at all. They were Trump's massive base of supporters. In their eyes, buying this stock is a way to support Trump and help him deal with political persecution. The stock's resilience and upward trend then indirectly attracted larger investors to push the price even higher. Speaking of which, I'd like to ask you, my friend, did you buy into Truth Social back then? If you didn't, would you consider buying this kind of ideological stock? If you would, type would in the comments section. If you wouldn't, type wouldn't. Let's see what you all think, and just how deep the support for Trump really goes. It was also during this year that a series of seemingly bizarre products began to appear one after another. The $399 gold high-top sneakers sold out within hours of their launch. There's the God Bless the USA Bible in collaboration with Lee Greenwood, priced at $59.99, and even custom Trump mechanical watches with top-tier models costing as much as hundreds of thousands of dollars. Financial disclosures reveal that just these items, Bibles, guitars, watches, sneakers, and perfume, have brought in over $10 million in revenue for Trump. In traditional business logic, this is called selling merchandise. But in Trump's wealth portfolio, this is the most brilliant and astute leap he's made in his 40-year business career. Think back to the 1.0 era. He was selling the clunkiest kind of real industry, buying land, taking out loans, and putting up buildings. While it looked glamorous, the cycles were long, and he was constantly at the mercy of debt and construction risks, liable to fall into the pit of bankruptcy at any moment. In the 2.0 era, he had moved from bricks to the IP era. He jumped out of the quagmire of selling physical assets and started selling his own brand, licensing the 5 letters Trump to developers around the world and just sitting back to collect his cut. But even in this model, a building was still required. Developers first have to get land permits, secure financing, build the structure, and sell the units. Throughout this process, there are long construction cycles and market risks. Only after all of that is successfully completed can Trump get paid. Then, when we reach the 3.0 era, it becomes the era of capital and belief. Trump disrupted the game once again. He no longer needed to wait painstakingly for a building to be completed. Instead, he directly injected his personal influence and political appeal into the capital markets and direct consumer scenarios. In November 2024, Trump won the election again and returned to the White House. And the thing that truly turned his wealth curve from a steady climb into a vertical surge happened 3 days before his inauguration. On January 17, 2025, 3 days before Trump's inauguration, a meme coin named after him was launched. This event caused quite a stir at the time. One of the reasons is that just a few years ago, Trump's own attitude toward cryptocurrency was quite negative, yet now he has actually jumped in and become the biggest player in the industry. Another aspect, and one I'd like to draw your attention to, is the nature of this thing. It's not about issuing stock for a company, nor is it about issuing a currency. It's more akin to minting a person's public influence into an asset that can be traded 24/7 on the global market. As for the trend after the meme coin launched, it was extremely volatile. The price was pushed to a high point in a very short time and then fell back sharply. And according to the financial disclosures this time, the operating entity associated with this token, CIC Digital, reported $635 million in royalty income for Trump in 2025. But we also have to tell the other side of this story. Statistics from data firms show that nearly 2/3 of the buyers who purchased this token ended up losing money. So why did Trump net over $600 million while the token plummeted? This is the characteristic of this new type of business model. The people issuing the tokens make money from transaction fees and royalties. As long as there's hype, they can make a steady profit. But those ordinary fans who rush in to chase the highs are very likely to end up buying into risk. So that was the sector where Trump made the most money last year, the first part of his cryptocurrency ventures. The second part is World Liberty Financial. WLF is a crypto platform co-founded by Trump and his 3 sons. The launch of WLF actually didn't go very smoothly. For the first few months, token sales were quite sluggish. The real turning point came after the election in January 2025, when an investment firm with ties to the UAE royal family bought nearly half of the company's equity. After that, the platform took off, with cumulative token sales surpassing $1 billion. In March 2025, WLF launched its own USD stablecoin, USD1. Immediately after, a sovereign wealth fund from Abu Dhabi announced that it would use the stablecoin to complete a massive investment worth $2 billion. So, friends, do you see the difference between this trajectory and that of a meme coin? Meme coins sell on the enthusiasm of retail investors. They come fast and go just as quickly. As for the WLF trajectory, it's tapping into sovereign-level capital, and this alone has generated nearly $800 million in personal income for Trump. Forbes crunched the numbers by combining these two streams, estimating that crypto operations contributed approximately $1.4 to $1.8 billion to Trump's overall wealth over the past year. While cashing out heavily in the crypto market, Trump's traditional businesses have also been flourishing on multiple fronts. First, he won his legal battles. In that civil fraud case in New York, the original judgment amount exceeded $500 million. The appellate court overturned this penalty, which effectively means nearly $500 million was recovered out of thin air. At the same time, his lawsuits against several media companies were settled one after another. In this year, he received $86.5 million in settlement money from them. The second thing is the revival of his licensing business, and it's been explosive. The restriction he set during his first term against any new overseas deals was adjusted for his second term to prohibit direct dealings with foreign governments, but it allows for partnerships with foreign private enterprises. Once that door was opened, overseas licensing revenue immediately jumped from a few million in 2023 to $59.5 million in 2025, an increase of nearly tenfold in 3 years, with 60% of that coming from Gulf countries. The third thing is the appreciation of his old assets. Mar-a-Lago's annual revenue in 2025 exceeded $77 million, a 50% increase year over year. The adjacent golf club saw a 27% increase, and the Doral course saw a net increase of $128 million. In 2025, Trump even paid off the $114 million debt on the 40 Wall Street building in one lump sum. However, in this extremely impressive set of books, there is still a huge loss hanging over it, which is TMTG, the parent company of Truth Social. Last year, the company's total annual revenue was only $3.7 million, while its net loss expanded from $401 million to $712 million. So when you add all of this up, it makes up the final book figures we mentioned at the beginning. $8.4 billion in assets, $1 billion in liabilities, and a net worth of $6.5 billion, ranking 645th in the world. However, out of these $8.4 billion in assets, only $1.1 billion is actual cash and liquid assets. This means that the vast majority of the wealth in Trump's massive empire is still anchored to two things. One is real estate and land, which have extremely poor liquidity, and the other is highly volatile market consensus. In other words, a series of business assets tied to his personal IP and influence. With that said, let's look back at these past 40 years. In the 1980s, Trump sold buildings. This business brought him to his peak, but also nearly knocked him out of the game. In the 2000s, he sold his name. He let others build the properties and shoulder the risks, while he only provided the name, completing a transition from heavy assets to light assets and shaking off the shackles of debt. In the 2020s, he is selling consensus. From stocks with a market cap of tens of billions to globally traded tokens, he has turned the number of people who support and identify with him into a cashable asset. Over 40 years and 3 transformations, what he sells has become increasingly intangible, yet the speed at which he cashes in has become faster and faster. This is actually quite counterintuitive. Most people only use one model to make money in their entire lives, while Trump has had to tear down and rebuild his business model almost entirely every 20 years, and each time it began with a setback that nearly crushed him. Although the majority of his $6.5 billion in paper wealth remains anchored in highly volatile consensus and slow to liquidate concrete, the debate over his public office and private interests is far from over. But setting aside all these controversies and looking solely at his wealth curve itself, from the chips of a dilapidated building in New York to the $6.5 billion on the Forbes list today, there lies nearly half a century in between, marked by several bankruptcies and reorganizations, and countless instances of being counted out or even suppressed. Whether you like Trump or not, there is one thing that even his fiercest opponents would find hard to deny. In this massive game of business and politics, Trump has never once admitted defeat. Alright, that's all for the day. Do you guys enjoy this kind of content? What are your thoughts on the astonishing changes in Trump's wealth over these past 40 years? What kind of inspiration does it give you? Welcome to continue the discussion and share your thoughts in the comments section. Before you leave, don't forget to hit that like button. If you're new here, welcome to subscribe to TrueView so you can frequently see my new videos on your YouTube homepage. Also, I'd like to ask for a small favor. Please click that hype button for me and share my show with friends you think might be interested. So I'd like to thank you all in advance, because every interaction you have helps my work reach further and be discovered by more people. Alright, thanks for watching everyone. Don't forget, we'll see you again at the same time this Saturday on Zhen Guan Dian, True Viewpoint. Bye for now.